Let me try to record this in this computer. Right, I think that we're online. So Sandy, thank you so much for being with us. This is the 8th episode of the Agile Spain webinar series, where we're basically trying to bring different leaders to talk about Agile and product. Would you mind to introduce yourself to the Agile community?
Sure. Hi everyone, and I am Sandy Mamoli, and first of all I'd like to say thank you for having me in the webinar. And as said, my name is Sandy, and I currently live in Auckland, New Zealand. I have been Agile coaching for the last 12 or 13 years. I'm so old I don't even remember exactly. And I have written a book which is about self-selection and creating great teams.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, Sandy. So the idea is that we're going to start to, talk with Sandy about different questions, especially about how to create great teams, focusing specifically on the topic that on the book that she wrote. So the first question, Sandy, and I think this is a pretty common one, and I think that a lot of people have asked you that. So when you wrote the book, which is called Creating Great Teams, How Self-Selection Let People Excel, I think that you get this question a lot. What is your point of view on self-selection? What do you consider as a self-selection, that process?
First of all, what I consider, or what I think it is that if you have a group of people and you want to have small cross-functional self-organizing teams, then you have two ways of getting into those teams. One way is the manager decides who goes into which team, or the other way is to have people choose which team they want to work in. And people picking their own teams is what self-selection is about. And we created a process that makes it safe to do so. And we have lots of companies where that succeeded in the past.
Great. So you're basically changing the pattern and saying, instead of having one person who is deciding who person is working with whom, you are basically let the people organize themselves around either the work that they have to do, or they say, all right, I know you, I want to work with you because I know that you're working, for example, really cool stuff. So it's basically up to the team or the person who are going to participate, right?
Exactly, yes.
In my opinion, I think that self-selection, especially depending on the company that you're working for, could be very, very difficult, very hard at the beginning. So do you have any kind of prerequisites that are necessary to say, all right, I think that these guys or this group of people can do self-selection themselves, or they need some kind of maturity, or where you say, this is the signals that I should see in order to have these people to self-select?
Very good point. Like, yeah, in many organizations, if I just showed up tomorrow and you showed up tomorrow and say, hey, let's self-select next week, it's probably not going to work. And first of all, this is impossible in this company, as you say. And I think it requires a certain culture where people do believe in the purpose of the organization, where people want to do their best, and where people do want to do what is good for the organization. If it's a company where the culture is so bad that nobody cares, it's not going to work. But in general, most people, you can get to a culture that if you treat them like responsible adults, they're going to act like responsible adults. And there's one way I use for testing whether it's possible or not. The first thing I start with is a hackathon. And if I can get a company or a group of people to do 24 hours, they select which team or which people they work with, they select what they work on, and they get that to work, even if it's only 24 hours, it's a pretty good indication that they're actually capable of doing this in real life.
Right. So exactly, I'm thinking, for example, where I'm at right now, which is like a large bank. And I imagine myself trying to explain this to one of the managers, which could be very difficult. And he the first question that he's gonna ask me is how can I convince my boss, because the hierarchies, how could convince my boss that this is going to be something, something workable. I mean, this is going to produce the outcome or the results that we are looking for. Um, could you tell us which tips and tricks that you have tried to, not to convince the manager, but to try to make them more open to try this kind of stuff?
And it's a fair conversation. It's a fair question. Like, as a manager, why would I do this? And I think, first of all, there are benefits, and that is, if this works, then we will have teams that are working together better, that collaborate better, because they are everyone's in a team where they want to be, with people they want to work with, working on stuff they want to work on. And even if they don't make 100% the right choice, or there are difficulties, because there always are, there's a bigger chance that they will make it work because they chose to be there. And so if you got higher job satisfaction, then people are happier and do better work. So they get more stuff done and better stuff done. And the other part of the conversation I have is what's the worst that could happen? Say we get into a room and we do a self-selection and it really doesn't work for us. It's not a big problem. We can still do what we've always done. We can still do management selection if you can't pull it off. And so it's low risk, and the benefits are actually potentially really high for a company. And having those conversations, honestly, I find really helpful.
Right, right, exactly. So, from what you said, there are another two things that I'm thinking right now. So, and I'm still thinking in like a big corporation, but I assume that the best, way to approach these kind of things. Uh, let's put it this way. I mean, it's like changing the way you work, right? Because at the end of the day, you are changing the way that people structure the work and how they structure themselves to accomplish that work. But the question is, do you have any specific? I don't know that this depends on the companies, but any specific metrics that you follow through after that to try to see, for example, um, that they, I don't want to say that people are performing differently, but for example, that these, that the people organizing themselves is a better way than if you have someone pointing fingers and saying you and you go behind this goal.
Yeah. What we have seen is that like the productivity is really hard to measure in software development. We can have some proxy around how many user stories or features do we deliver each week, each
Mm-hmm.
month. That's a proxy. Is the quality still good? Measuring bugs, and some of those together will give you an indication. And from what we've seen, those are the things that we measure, and that trending upwards in general.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we're not in a lab, so it is really hard to prove that it was self-selected versus non-self-selected, because we can't repeat the experiment.
Right.
So what we do have is some data, some trends, and some evidence that points in that direction. The
Right.
other thing that we usually measure is how people feel about the work. Basically, a survey around Daniel Pink's
All right.
master purpose. Like, do you feel that the work comes to fruition with customers? And a number of questions. And we've seen the trends go up there. And that's what I usually measure.
Right, right. The thing is that can be very tricky because I normally see that, for example, people when they try to start measuring, they don't have, for example, like a baseline. So it's very difficult to say, all right, we see that the productivity of people is this one, or for example, the happiness in the team is this one. But where what is the baseline of the yardstick that we are putting to try to say that we have improved or not? So that is something, one of the mistakes that I've seen. So we don't measure where we are right now, so when we try to, go a little bit further, it
Yeah.
can be difficult.
Especially if you have no teams at all, and all of a sudden you have teams. it's really hard to measure whether it is better that they were self-selected versus somebody put them into a team.
Right, right, right. Got it. So basically, I mean, you start measuring based, of course, on dance being, work. Also, I think that, in my opinion, please just jump in if I'm saying something that can sound very, very, very weird. But also, at the end of the day, we want to produce results. Also, trying to focus again those teams on outcomes. Maybe as you said, maybe could be like a more like a leading indicators rather than saying productivity and saying how many story points have you been able to accomplish or this kind of stuff. But I think that focus on those stuff to see how the people feel with this self-organizing. At the end of the day, when you are doing your work, try to focus on outcomes rather than outputs.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Totally agree.
So another question that I had, Sen, is one of the things that is basically recurring is also based on the conversation that I have with Heidi. I mean, the theory on her book, which is Dynamic Reteaming, is she's basically challenging the idea that the people should remain, static. And I think that is pretty in line with this thing of self-selection. So at some point in time, you will have, some member of the team that we're going to say, you know what, I think it's time to try to, break or destroy, between quotes, the team, in order to, you know, uh, pursue another goal or whatever. Do you have a cadence that you have, like a, I don't know, rule of thumb to try to review, for example, how the team is doing, or
Mm. But first of all, I do just want to make it clear that there is something in between tearing these teams apart all the time, and they never chance to get to know each other and develop trust and collaborate well. That's bad. On the other hand, a team that is stale, and research shows that happens after about 2 years with no changes, is also bad. So we're going for something in between, and usually not changing the entire team, but just having some new impulses. And what has proven best, in my opinion, from what I've seen, is to repeat self-selection every 6 to 9 months. And that's the first self-selection gives you the most movement, with people moving around to different teams. And after the second, third, fourth, fewer people move to different things. So it gets slower. You don't tear them apart entirely, but a few people always want to do something else. And that's really, really good because you have stable-ish teams with new members and impulses. So that proved to be perfect. And there's also another thing that with the cadence that I think is really important, because if you do have self-selection and word gets out, it attracts people who want to come and work for that company. And if you join the day after self-selection has happened, then you don't benefit.
yeah, yeah,
Giving those people the chance
yeah,
to be
yeah,
part is
yeah.
really important.
So it's also like a motivation thing to try to say, you know what, if you're seeing that we have this opportunity to try to create our own teams, you also can be part of that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Have you ever experienced, for example, something? This is always the typical question where you're saying, have you seen, for example, any exception of that? After 6 or 9 months, would you want to try to, all right, let's check how the things are going, guys. With I think that you should, for example, change the team or whatever. You have that feeling with the team. You have a same answer for all of them, saying, you know what, we are happy where we are. We don't want to change, and that team basically kept exactly the same.
Yeah, that has happened. Yeah, over quite long periods of time, and that was good because it's self-selection. In that case, is check in. Do you still want to work in that team? Everyone's still there. Keep doing it,
Right,
and if
right.
they decide.
Yeah, and I think that this topic is basically very tricky because at the end of the day, for example, if you have a team that is performing, for example, really well, they get along, they are producing very impact work, um, and for example, in my case, I want to join that team, but we are almost 9 people, so if we start adding, the complexity of the team is going to change, and the dynamics, if you are, if only one person, are going to change. How do you handle that situation when you have to explain someone, you know what? the size of the team is already big. So
we usually have a constraint on the size, and that's adults talking to each other, maybe negotiating what they think is fair and also what's best for the company. And I have seen people go as far as going, hey, I really want to do this and you really want to do this too. How about I start out in that next self-selection we swap, or next self-selection in 6 to 9 months, you get a wild card and you get the first choice. People trading like that happens.
I like the concept of the wild card. Seems to be all right. I have my wild card. I'm gonna use it. That's good. So going back to the topic that we discussed at the beginning, Sandy, where you're mentioning that at the end of the day, this could be also a really good like a hiring tool, for example, for managers. But have you ever had the chance to talk to a manager where he used to, for example, select people for a team, and now he has to stop doing it? What how do they feel? Well, where is the perception of that when they don't have the chance to select the people to assemble, for example, a team?
I've been that person,
Oh,
and
first experience.
it's, it's great. I don't know if you've ever tried it as a manager, but it's horrible.
Yeah.
And the reason it's horrible is that you go away with the other managers and you put people into Excel spreadsheets and you move them around and you try to do what's best for everyone, and go, boom, nailed it. And you go out and think, oh, that person actually doesn't want to do this thing, and this other person really hates working with that person, and you've got it all wrong with the best intentions. So you go back to the drawing board and you try again, and really it's horrible work.
Yeah.
So I and everyone I know has just found it great to not having to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like they have nothing to do once that is taken off their hands, because that's such a small and annoying part of their work that I have managed to see worry, be really concerned around what if it doesn't work. I've seen
Mm-hmm.
fear,
Mm-hmm.
but after it's worked, never ever anyone who missed management selection.
Right. So I think from your perspective, when you stop doing that kind of things because you trust the team so they can self-organize, what did you start to do? I mean, have you changed, for example, your mind to focus on different things, or how you could help the team from another perspective? I mean, I think that your role has to be reinvented at some point, right? At some extent.
Yeah. I think if you get to a small cross-functional team, whichever way they come about,
Mm-hmm.
and they're self-organizing, the role as a manager or leader changes.
Right.
And can be hard in the beginning, and I've seen people struggle with that. Like, we had a dev manager who in the beginning still, like, he said he just stood up every 10 minutes and like, where's the fire, where can I help, only to like look around and go, oh, nowhere, it's all, they have got this. And he said he took him several months to get used to it, and getting used to manage when you do all the urgent stuff,
Right.
all the emergency, all the fires, all the urgent stuff, all of a sudden that's gone, to go, oh, I need to focus on the important stuff now.
Right.
And it's both difficult, but also really rewarding ultimately. So you
Yeah.
get to be a bit more strategic.
And I think also it can be sometimes liberating for the manager, because at the end of the day, if you're like to do this kind of because the tendency is to try to start micromanaging everyone on the team. So when you say you can dedicate your time to do important things, that put the team a little bit not aside, but you trust them, try to do the work, and you can start see, for example, improvements, or try to focus more on strategy rather than you know firefighting every single things that comes up, right?
Yes, exactly. And most people don't like micromanaging other people.
Yeah.
They do it because they genuinely believe it is necessary. And things wouldn't work without them doing that.
Yeah, I think now that you're saying it, I don't think that people ever, ask the question themselves, saying, "What would happen if I don't, I stop micromanaging? You know, what will happen, for example, in 2 weeks? See, for example, differently, but they have this like I don't know if this is a limiting belief or what, that if they are doing, chasing the team all day behind them every single time, they're gonna get better results, or the things are gonna be better, somehow, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I think there's also that myth that there's only two things, like either I as a manager do it and micromanage, or you as a team do it 100%. And I
Yeah,
can't talk to you.
exactly,
There are
and
the
that,
steps.
yeah. No, but that's one of the things that I said, and because I think that that question came at the beginning when you're saying, at some point you need to see, because if you don't have them the proper environment, maybe the team is was ready to try to self-select themselves or run that process. But for example, the problem is not the team; it's absolutely the manager or the people who are around the team that, for example, they don't have the trust. The environment is not psychological, safe to try to experiment these kind of things. This can be also that, because I think that the question before is, say, right, if you want to do this, for example, in your case, you go to an organization, what are the first things that you do to try to see, guys, we need to work before in, like things like psychological safety, collaboration, before we can run, like this self-selection workshop or activity, right?
Mhm. Yes, you need to have base culture.
Yeah, yeah, that
That
is,
people know they're not going to be punished for choosing a particular team, and
yeah.
also that once self-selection is done,
Hmm.
people decide what the team should be like. The worst thing as a manager that you can do is to then make changes.
Right. I'm
Then you,
gonna. This is very serious. Do you have like a? Sorry for saying this word, but you have like an assessment or checklist, and you're saying, all right, this is like two or three things that you say, this is not going to, this is not going to pan out, or something like that, like a checklist of saying,
I do the like if if management are ready, it's the are you prepared to go with whatever the teams decide? You
mm,
can give complaints, but are you going to accept that choice? Because if not, then do an honest management selection, which is better than doing self-selection, then changing it and losing all trust.
right,
It's one of the things I do. I do actually really run a hackathon as a check to see if people can do it, but also to give
mm,
people confidence. Because it's not just management that needs to be convinced.
right,
People are worried, like, can we actually do this? Can we pull this off?
yeah,
And go, hey guys, you did it really well on FedEx Day or during the hackathon. Of course you can do it.
right,
Those are the things I look for.
right, right. Oh, interesting, because you mentioned a couple of times the hackathon. Seems to be like the hackathon is one of the perfect times where you can start creating this kind of camaraderie around different people, and see, for example, if they're ready. That's great.
And
That's great.
I pull things out of that you managed to choose a team, you managed to choose people. You did not put yourself on two teams. You
Mm,
did not worry about utilization. Your teams were small. Hey, you learned this.
right,
Now let's apply this.
right, right, right. And have you ever faced this situation where you started with all this process, everything was great, but after 2 or 3 weeks, everything fell apart? I've seen this with a lot of transformations where people seems to be very engaged, but it's like they're
Yeah.
they're losing they're losing momentum. I don't know if because they were not convinced, or what happened, but
Um, yes and no. Like first of all, like self-selection is only about the team design,
right,
and it's the what comes out of it is not going to be perfect.
right,
It's
right,
just that
right,
what management selects isn't perfect either, but at least you got people's buy-in. And once you go out of the self-selection, all you have is pieces of paper and a blueprint. You don't have a team yet.
yeah,
Then you put in the work to make it happen, to work with people. So you take this collection of people and help them become a team. So that's when coaching really starts, and when you need to make sure that the enthusiasm doesn't die after 2-3 weeks. I think that's any team, but I think it's super important how the team comes about.
Right. So you also recommend after sex selection that as soon as the team that team is it's assembled, you have to give them the tools, like for example a coach or someone to try to help them start that journey, right?
Yeah. And there's actually no difference in what I would do with a team that management has selected and a team that has self-selected.
Right.
I think a self-selected team might have a better starting point because they have chosen each other. But what I do as a coach with each of those teams is actually the same.
Right. Right. And for example, what happens, within the teams, I stay within the teams in the sense of, so the good thing is that you haven't even mentioned yet, neither Scrum nor Kanban nor, any particular framework. So is that selection include also the way that the teams work, with their own dynamics?
It comes afterwards. It
Yeah.
comes afterwards. Like my preference as a coach is that a team chooses how they will work.
Right.
I like to give teams a purpose, and then how they achieve that purpose is up to them.
Right.
And I also think that kind of pure methods are great to start out. They're great starter kits.
Mm-hmm.
Any real or advanced team will mix and match practices and change as they go, because sometimes it just becomes boring or you want to try something new. So I think it starts out a bit more pure and then it becomes mix and match. And I don't actually personally mind what they end up with or what they start with.
Right. 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 So you basically, let the team at that point see, for example, what is better for themselves, with the help of a coach, right? But you don't know, saying, guys, you're gonna do a Scrum, so make
Yeah,
all right,
yeah.
make up your mind
I
for that. All right.
Yes, I literally have them list all the ingredients, like what ingredients do we like, stand-ups, Kanban board, lead time, all the ingredients, and then cool, which ingredients do you want to use? And then they
Right. Right.
okay,
Got it.
try that. And then we can see what we need to add and remove.
Right. Right. Awesome. Um, another question here that people normally ask when we have these kind of methods where you can start, self-select the team. But what happened with the work? So let's suppose that we have an organization. We have, for example, our beautiful roadmap for the next year. Guys, these are the initiatives, themes, whatever you want to call it. But I'm management, and we need to make some profit, and this is the initiative that we have to work on. And let's suppose that always happens that some of the initiative is not very, appealing to people, right? So typical situation. What happened? How do you handle that situation? Do you write like a working agreement to try to say, guys, we're gonna working on this, initiative that is not as, compelling as the other ones, and then you have another team working on that. How do you handle the situation when the initiative is not like, people are not motivated to work on that?
Yes. What I found really, really interesting, because I had exactly the same concern, like this team that has to do this really boring work, or the BAU team, super boring.
Yeah.
Why would any? And then I found out during doing this many times that just because I think this is boring doesn't mean other people think it's boring. And you'd be surprised. Like I found out I was just projecting heavily. I think it's boring. Nobody's going to want to do this. Lots of people wanted to do this, and I was really surprised always. And I think that's actually a really important thing to think of. And I got myself to remember, like when I was a junior developer, I thought it was super excited and complicated and challenging to fix some bugs.
Oh man. Yeah.
Because I was a junior. It was amazing. 10 years later, it's like, oh, boring. But people are at different stages and have different interests.
So can we say, for example, that just try to remove your own bias, and because you think that the activity is not, attracting at some extent, don't think that the people will think like you are doing, right? So let the people see. But given the situation where you get to the point where, let's suppose that one activity in the roadmap is not being tackled by one of the teams, how do you handle that? Do you invite them to see, hey guys, we cannot leave this activity out of the things that we have to do? How we can? It's like a negotiation, as you said before.
Yeah, I've actually seen that a couple of times. Like one with an initiative or work that needed to be done,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody wanted to do it. So they actually realised this team should not exist. Let's
Mm.
not do it. It tells us something. And I've seen other times where people have not chosen to work on a team because of a particular product owner.
Mm.
And they notice some things like we rather know so now we can deal with it rather than pretending it doesn't exist or we didn't know.
Mm.
So that's just information and it's good.
Right, that's what I was about to say. I mean, at the same time, this is an activity that is like revealing a lot of things that are happening in the organization that maybe cover at some extent, right?
Yes. Yeah. And that's where you need to have a little bit of a culture, at least, where people do want to face some things that might come up,
Mm-hmm.
rather than hide them.
Right, right. Oh man, fantastic, fantastic. Um, so have you ever seen, Sandy, one of these kind of teams that came out of the self-selection that that they became like a high-performing team? And before saying yes or no, what is your definition of a high performing team?
That's a very complicated question. Um, the way I would say I can recognize a high
Hmm.
performing team is actually in two parts. One is from the inside, if you're part of that team, and the other one from the outside.
Mm.
From the inside, I will be able to recognize it that ideas come from different people. Everyone speaks up. People don't have to personally like each other, but they have to respect each other and trust each other. They have fun, there's banter, and they enjoy working together as a team.
Mm.
And they also achieve their goals that
Right,
they themselves they want to achieve.
right.
From the outside, I think the same. They achieve the goals they have chosen to achieve. I can see how they interact, that there's banter and laughter. And I can also sense and see a pride in how they interact with other teams, other parts of the organization.
Mm.
And I can see that other people really want to be part of this team.
It's beautiful what you're saying, the difference between the outside and the inside, but it's really nice that most of the traits that you have mentioned are not specifically saying you need to write the best code as you possibly do. So I know that you need to be competent at some point, some extent, but most of the traits that you mentioned are basically more like, I don't want to say soft skills, but they are things like trust, collaboration, coherence, psychological safety. You know, it's very interesting because sometimes the people think that the only thing that they need to do their work is to know how to program, how to test, which is important, of course, but you
Yes.
can you can have the five best programmer in the world, but if they don't integrate or collaborate, they they're not going to produce what they have to their
Yeah.
potential.
Yeah. I think it's like in team sports, individual performance doesn't
Hmm.
exist.
Yeah,
Like you don't win a football game by yourself.
yeah,
You don't do work by yourself. You need
right,
a company.
right. Yeah, there's a beautiful quote that say with this kind of regarding to sports, that with one person, which is like the star, you can win a match, but with a team you can win a championship, right? They also say that. Yeah, that's true.
That's not
um, yeah. um, so Another thing that it is pretty common, Sandy, especially when you're talking about teams, we have this definition in Agile where we say that we wanna, we don't want a team of specialists, we want a team of generalists, and we have this fantastic T-shaped thing about that. Does that matter when you're doing self-selection, or depending on the work, or?
Mm. I think it does.
Mhm.
And a team that is just specialist will struggle.
Mm.
They will struggle collaborating. So I think both are needed on a team, and both deep specialist knowledge and the way I assess team after self-selection is, as a group, do you have all the skills that are needed to deliver to your purpose? Whether many of those are in one person or they are each in a different person, doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
I pushed a bit to be more T-shaped because there's also a restriction on how big this can be.
Right.
So there will need to be some people in general.
Right. Right. And for example, if that is the case, when you're saying the team, guys, do you have all the, all the people that you need? And for example, if they say no, do you write, you do another round of self selections to try to see if they fulfill that missing role,
Yes,
particular
yes,
skill.
absolutely. It never works in the first round.
Oh.
Self, there's always like the first one as a general rule is always insane. I've seen teams with 7 developers, nothing else.
Right.
Need skills too.
Mm-hmm.
The second round is a bit more sane and people move around a bit more. And then from the third round, it actually starts to really work when people realize, oh, we need to not just look at this one squat that I'm in, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to solve a bigger puzzle.
Right.
So people start seeing the bigger picture. People start negotiating and having ideas like, hey, what about if you go over there and I go over here and this guy goes there? What the whole thing works. So
Mm-hmm.
it takes a few rounds to get the hang of it, and that's fine. Each of the rounds I usually run only 10 minutes.
Oh, yeah, sure. Could you explain very briefly, a high level, the different steps on the process of cell selections? So, for example, you have to run like a 1 day of cell selections. How would you follow, the sequence of the steps?
So given you've done all the preparation, you're ready to go. So the
Mm-hmm.
first thing that happens today is I have a facilitator kick off things,
Mm-hmm.
remind people and kick off day,
Mm-hmm.
and then have product owners for each squad, each about this is the squad or the team, this is the purpose, and this is roughly the type of work we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, first self-selection round starts with a big timer on the wall, 10 minutes. And people then grab their photo, they have a photo of themselves or a card, and put that photo into the spot they want to be and move them towards the spot. After 10 minutes, there's a check-in, which is a bit like Eurovision Song Contest
Yeah.
sort of thing,
Yeah.
where, hey, we're the squad, we got too many testers, not enough developers, and no, not done. And each squad does that, so you have information in the room, and then you go again until you have either solved it or you can't get any further,
Mm-hmm.
and then and that's it.
Right. So normally, how long does the process take? Like an hour, 2 hours, more or less.
Depends on the number of people.
Uh-huh.
Like 150, that was like 5 hours. I've done it like 15, 20 people or 20, 25 people. That will be like a couple of hours.
Right.
There's
So
also it's the first one or you've done it before.
right. So basically, what you're saying is like, you are presenting the work that is supposed to be done, right? But someone from the product giving the vision of what we want to build, you know, I don't know if the strategy or something, but you're basically presenting the work to everybody, and then after that, you're basically start, this kind of run where people are shuffling from one place to the other, and you basically run 2 or 3 times that round to try to see until the team is basically assembled and you have all the skills you need. So the output of the activity is to try to the initiative of that vision of that part of the product has to come out with the team that is going to pursue that part of the work, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Got it. Got it. Got it. All right. It's
Sometimes
beautiful.
it also depends on how many people you have.
Mm-hmm.
Like the
Mm-hmm.
more people, the more complex it gets.
Right. Got it. Got it. Nice. Because I'm thinking how, for example, how you can do it. For example, depending on the also depending on this on the place where you are. For example, I know that there are a lot of banks, at least here in Spain, that they're trying to achieve a huge transformation, but not only on the IT department. Sorry for saying department, IT department, but they're also trying to involve, like accounting, HR, and those people, are very, very specialist. So when I asked you the question about generalist versus specialist, maybe for this kind of, areas or type of work, maybe you need some kind of people who are more, specialists than, an IT when you need to have different skills.
I think you do, and I also and I think there's nothing wrong with specialists. We need
Mm-hmm.
them. The only thing is that also specialists need to be able to collaborate and
Right.
help other people in their team, and not go, well, I only do this. Like I'm a developer, but across the board,
Right. Right.
I want help.
I think it's very, yeah. I think it's not it's not prescriptive the way that you are sort of selecting the teams, right? Um, but I'm thinking also, for example, if you're a team, right, and I need to collaborate with you, for example, you're from the legal, you have some knowledge from legal that we need, but not from the entire work that we need to do. Does this kind of self-selection workshop covers that part of how the people interact, or this is something that depending on how we structure the organization, whether if we are using, I don't know, or safe, less, or whatever crazy framework that we want to mention, um, you handle that, outside of the self-selection workshop. On the self-selection, you only want to have the people who want to work on that, and then what happens after that, or how that team interacts with other ones, either because you have a dependency or whatever, that happens
Mhm.
outside.
Yeah. I've only ever done it outside. I think it might be not a bad idea to try it and see what happens if it's in the same room. If it's, again, depending on how many people you have.
Mm-hmm.
So far, what I've always done is then, okay, we have the teams and they're self-selected,
Mm-hmm.
and then have a second self-selection, which is with the operations teams or the legal team, and they self-select a squad. Like I'm this legal person, and I work with those 3 squads, and you are the other legal person. You work with those squads. You have they select which squad they want.
Mm.
The other thing, and that has worked. I've got experience with that. That works. Other things I would like to try is to have some kind of speed dating.
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's 2 ways, because I think it's not that cool. There's only one way, but speed dating, or to have that as self-selection. But again, if it's too many people if you have like 30 teams being
That's much.
selected, it might be a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So basically, you have done it up to how many? How much was the biggest number that you have ever tried is?
At the same time,
Yeah.
150 in the same room.
Because of the Dunbar's number, and say no more than 150.
I wish I could say so, but I think more coincidence.
More coincidence. All right, no. All right. Um, all right. So I had a before we leave, but I want to take more time than an hour, Sandy. So I had a lot of other questions that I would like to ask you before we finish. But they were related what we were discussing before. Um, so one other thing that I was thinking is like extreme programming normally extreme programming encourage a lot of activities like, for example, pair programming. Then it came along more programming, techniques like swarming, or these kind of stuff. Do you think that they're also important, for example, when you're self-selecting teams, or the coaches that are working with the teams are recommending to the people to do these kind of things?
I think yes, totally. I think those are amazing things and they're really important, regardless of a team being self-selected or not self-selected. And
Oh,
yeah,
this
I
way.
think that's good things for everyone.
Right, right. So, one of the things that's challenging also for me with these kind of processes, it's, for example, um, I know that we were discussing that before. So we are saying, you need to have the right culture. You need to, but um, what do you think that is the best approach? I have like a phrase that I also try to keep in my mind with everything that I try to accomplish in the bank, which is typical thing: things big, start small, learn fast, which is something that Barry O'Reilly also repeats a lot, which I really liked it. What have you learned along the way with when you started you started doing these kind of things at the beginning, and now that you have been doing it for so long? What have you learned with this process, and the things that you changed, you incorporated along the way?
Um, Things I've learned is one of the things we changed at our first self-selection, we had a trial, we had iterations that were longer than 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 25 people and it took almost a day. It could have taken longer. We realized actually this needs to be short iterations. We changed it to 10 minutes and had the same effect. You don't get more done if you have more time.
Right.
The other thing that we realized was how important it was to visualize, to not have just names on sticky notes if it's a lot of people, because you can't see that, but to visualize
Right.
with photos, squads, have a big check or a big cross and overall, and have check and cross for each skill. Really important so people, if they scan for who they should talk to, can find what. Learned that. And another thing that I have learned was two more things. Like one was just because I think no one's going to work in that place,
Right.
and I find other people do love it. And the other thing I learned was that it's really all about relationships.
Mm.
Like people, why they chose the team they chose, and I gave them the option to do what's best for the company because of the work they were getting to do, or because of the people they wanted to work with. Most people said what's best for the company and the work they wanted to do.
Right.
And that was totally consistent with the behavior that we saw. So I think it's a complete lie. It's what people think they should answer.
Right.
Because what we've seen is that when people, for example, aren't around or
Mm-hmm.
they can't make 150 people, someone's on a holiday or something,
Right.
they
Right.
had to use a proxy. And all the instructions for the proxies were, don't really care what squad it is, but whatever you do, take me with you. So people choose 100% on who they want to work with and a little bit on what it is they do and what's best for the company. But the most important thing is who are the people and the relationship. And I actually found, and that's okay.
Right. So it's beautiful how you have been able to learn also yourself from the process that you're starting to implement, and how you being able to iterate it, and also see, for example, these kind of patterns that you see, and that I believe that these kind of patterns that you have identified along the way help you also to hone the process itself, right?
Absolutely, yeah. To hone the process and to also not panic
Mm.
when
Yeah.
first round and you sharp go and everyone stands around and does nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
no, it's going to take 2 to 3 minutes, then people will start moving. But
Right.
it's normal. Don't panic. Those little things are things that I've learned by doing it several
Yeah.
times.
Give them time. Give them time to to get used to the process, to the flow, and everything will come up later. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. Just to try to, one question before we close, Sandy. What is the feedback, for example, from your clients, not from your organization, because you have done it, within your organization, you have tried, first person yourself. But for example, have you been able to incorporate something, some of the feedback that your clients, have given you in the different opportunities, and which kind of feedback, they give you?
Yeah. So in general, the feedback is that it worked really well. The teams are way better than they might have been. The people are happier.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes mistakes that we made, like not being aware of a constraint and therefore not making it explicit. Like
Right.
there was one team where there was budget for 3 people only,
Mm-hmm.
realized that, and then 8 people chose it, and we had to say during the self-selection,
Sure.
oh, this is a 3-person team. So we've learned to really, really think about the constraints. Is there anything that we're forgetting?
Right.
Didn't do that. Some of the feedback we got, like, damn, got that. So small things, small mistakes that we made. But apart from that, other feedback was really successful, way better than it would have been otherwise. And that from management, I've also heard it feels a lot lighter
Right.
because we have teams and nobody's coming to me complaining about which team they're in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a relief. Actually, that is a relief. Um,
Yeah.
so, good question, Sandy, regarding this. Do you, what's next? I think that you have been, iterating, incorporating feedback, but have you started to see some kind of riff or variations from the process that you can use for any other thing that you could be possible? Now we're having a lot of, like, you know, uh, Jürgen Appel likes to say like a mojito thing. So we are combining different techniques. We're using, maybe liberating structures with this. We are, using sociocracy 3.0 for other things. Have you started to, blending, this process of self-selection with other techniques or incorporate them?
Yes, absolutely. Or maybe like the self-selection has stayed the same. That's
Mm-hmm.
just a starting. After that, I use all those beautiful techniques. Like
Mm-hmm.
I love Jürgen Appelo's 7 levels of delegation, delegation poker. I've done holocracy.
Mm-hmm.
That I really love too. And
Mm-hmm.
so using all those things, and I think that it's something that stands on a really good foundation of self-selected teams
Right.
and improve what comes after.
Yeah. And I think it's also like a process of for yourself. It's also experimentation to see, for example, what is best and what maybe is useful for one organization is not going to be useful for other one because of the context and this kind of stuff.
Yes.
All right.
Some that I've seen is like some people have tried it with distributed teams
Mm-hmm.
that were well, so they have added some ways of doing
Right.
that. What I personally love to do is to just give a company, give a group of people a strategy. You go,
Okay.
first you tell me what teams are needed, then you self-select into those teams. I
Right.
think that would be awesome to not even prescribe what teams are needed.
Oh, great, great. So thank you so much, Andy, for your time. It's been really, really insightful. At least to try to see, for example, how your experience with this kind of stuff, uh, encourage others to try it, which is also good. Um, before we finish the call, what are the would you like to tell the people, for example, where they can find you? Website resources, LinkedIn influencers that you have been followed because you consider they're doing a really good job. Books, I don't know, whatever you consider that people can jump into and start learning about self selections.
Um, so I have on our website, which is www.nomad8.com.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole section of self-selection with
Mm-hmm.
both case studies and also a pocket guide with a number of checklists,
Mm-hmm.
how to do it and how to run it.
Mm-hmm.
There is on the business agility website, and also our website is a video of a talk that I did at the Business Agility Conference in
Right.
Vienna this year.
Mm-hmm.
Selection, 20-minute video. And then there's, of course, the book. And people can find me on the website and lots of stuff there as a section. On Twitter, you can find me at @smamol, and my email address is sandy@nomad8.com. Feel free to drop me a line or connect to me on LinkedIn.
All right. So, Sandy, thank you again. Thank you so much. And we know that it's very late for you, but you have made some time to talk with us. As I really appreciate it. Let's keep in touch. We'll be publishing the webinar. I'll let you know, and I will publishing all the resources that you mentioned on the page of the webinar, so people can have access to.
Well, thank you very much for having me. That was
Please.
fun.
It's a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Let's keep in touch.
Yes, definitely. Do that.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.